Hello there and welcome to another video. My name's John. This channel is dedicated to several different things, but this video is another one regarding a vintage film camera. In my previous video, I featured the Olympus OM-101, and unfortunately my version is not functioning. And I didn't want you to think that Olympus cameras aren't any good, so I've got another one for you this week, and this is the OM-40 Program. So let's waste no time, let's take a look. So, the Olympus OM-40 Program, 35mm SLR. We've not got a lens fitted at the moment, but I'll come back to the lens in a moment. I've not owned this for long. It was one particular model I've been after for a while at the right price. But only having used it a couple of times, it's already turning into one of my favourite cameras to use, and I think I'm going to end up using it an awful lot more. Let me just run through the controls as I normally do for you. So on the back, we have our viewfinder, obviously. We have a little window for us to be reminded of what film's loaded if we're not sure. We've got a nice little grip here, and the body, I don't know if you can see, is kind of shaped so it does kind of fit the hand quite nicely with another sort of grip effect on the front here. On top then we have got the take-back spool with a pop-out crank handle, which is pretty common for us to wind the film back, and as per usual we can lift this to open the back to load the film. You can see that it supports DX film with our contacts down here. If you're not sure about DX film, I did cover a video on it, so I'll link that up in the corner here. Our shutter then is actually a fabric shutter, which is unusual for a camera of this age. It was more common on older cameras. The OM-40 dates from 1985 and they're normally metal shutters, but I quite like that. It works quite well. Pretty standard arrangement in terms of feeding the film on and obviously winding it. Let's just close the back. Underneath then the crank we have got a little selector switch. So the first thing we've got is a battery check, which if we turn it to that, whoops, we get a tone and also a light on the front to show that the battery is good. If the light starts to blink or the tone starts to sort of be intermittent, then it's time to change the battery. We've got then some other settings. So currently set to P for program, which I'll come back to. We've got auto exposure and we've got manual exposure. So normally we set to program, but I'll explain that in a moment. We have hot shoe for a flash, and we also have our film speed selector. I'm going to come back to this in more detail before the end of the video because it's not straightforward like most, but yeah, obviously it's a case of lifting this and being able to change the film speed. Okay. Obviously we have our shutter release button here, pretty straightforward, and because it's got automatic exposure settings, we can do a half press to actually get a readout on our light meter. Crank handle to wind the film on, and a little frame count on the side here, and we've also got a self timer switch, which if we switch that over and press the shutter, this light starts to flash, and I believe it's 12 seconds we've got before the shutter fires. If we were to wind on again, this switch is automatically knocked back to normal mode. If we go around to the front, obviously we've got the light that I already mentioned there. We also have a knob here marked ESP. I'm going to come back to that. This isn't a knob that you've seen or a control you've seen on any of the other cameras that I've shown you so far, so it's worth talking about separately, so I'll come back to that in a moment. Like I say, we don't have a lens fitted yet. I'll put one on in a moment, but I just wanted to show you here is a shutter speed ring. Shutter speeds range from bulb, 1 second, and then right the way down to 1/1000th of a second. On the bottom of the camera then we have battery cover, and it takes the LR44 cell batteries that are pretty readily available, to be honest with you. We've then got the mount for a tripod, but also some contacts and a little driver here for adding an optional extra on the bottom here, an automatic wind-on motor. So you would fit that to the bottom, the contacts would control it, and this would actually wind film on for you automatically rather than you having to use the crank lever here. Okay, so back round to this knob here. Normally, we would leave this set to ESP, and this is a feature that the OM-40 had. Doesn't stand for extrasensory perception, so it's not a mind reader or anything like that. It actually stands for electroselective pattern metering. And what this basically does, it's quite difficult to explain, but effectively the system assumes that whatever is in the center of the frame is the subject, and so it'll measure the light on that subject, but it will also measure separately the surrounding image and the light that's reflected back from that. And if there's a great difference between the two, it will automatically meter accordingly based on the subject. It's often known as spot metering, but it was quite a new system for this particular model back in 1985. Now, we could turn that off by turning this little dial, and now we're on what's known as TTL metering, and basically that's just the looking at the image as a whole and not looking at it as the center being separate from the outside, if that makes sense. So in the normal circumstances, we'd leave that set to ESP and everything should work great. Okay, let's go back to some of the features that I've skipped over. As you probably can see, we've got a little DX logo here for DX film, and this relates to the knob that I mentioned earlier. So if we've got a DX film in, we can set it to the current setting that it is now, DX ISO auto set, and the camera automatically then knows the film speed that we've got inserted, and it can obviously cope with that automatically. So what we do is we set it to program mode. We set our aperture on our lens, whatever lens we've got on, to the lowest aperture, or the narrowest aperture, whatever you want to look at it, say f16, f22, whatever it happens to be. And basically program mode then automatically, when you half press, will meter the shot, and it will fire at the correct exposure for that thing, for that set of conditions. So you don't have to make any other adjustments. It's basically worked out all for you. However, obviously you can override that if you wish. For instance, aperture priority mode, you can switch to auto, set whatever aperture you want, and the computer inside will automatically meter the shot and apply the correct shutter speed for you. And then finally, manual. Obviously, we can set to manual mode, whereby we're setting both the shutter speed and the aperture we want. But again, the camera with a half press will meter, and it will tell you in the viewfinder, it'll tell you what shutter speed it recommends you go for a correctly exposed shot. Now, if we choose not to use DX film or to ignore the features of DX, then we can obviously override this. We don't have to set it to that. We can first of all turn this to our manual ISO settings. At the moment I'm on 400, and I can lift the collar and change that to various speeds. But even on the 400 option, as I've got here, I could then click this way to step up to 2 f-stops in a plus or in a minus direction. And what this basically does is it enables us to either pull or push our film beyond its normal ISO setting. I will make a separate video regarding pushing and pulling, because it's a bit of a weighty subject to cover here, but suffices to say this will compensate for particularly dark or particularly bright shots, depending on what film speed we have. But as I said to you, you know, if you've got DX film, set it on that, and then you haven't got to worry, to be honest with you. So like I say, I haven't got a lens fitted at the moment. Let's put one on. The reason I didn't was simply the fact that the only lens that I've got that will fit this at the moment is this rather sort of large and cumbersome, what is it, 70 to 150 mil zoom lens. But yeah, I'm on the lookout for a prime lens that will fit this at the moment. So fingers crossed I won't be stuck with this big beastie for too long. But just to show you how it works, so this is the OM mount that was unique to Olympus. And obviously it's a bayonet mount. We just line up the red dots, whoops, turn and click. So we've obviously then got our aperture, our zoom and focusing all based on this particular lens. On these lenses there's a slight release here for removing the lens. Again, we just press that button and then we can obviously turn the lens until it removed. We've also got a button down here that will temporarily allow us to see the depth of field rather than it only being engaged once we actually press the shutter. So there we go, the Olympus OM-40 Program. Like I said to you, despite mine having a few sort of cosmetic issues with scratches and so on, it works perfectly, and I'm really enjoying using it. You know, particularly in manual mode, it's beautiful to use, but obviously I can flip it over to program or to auto, and it works very, very well. So there you go. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed that. Really appreciate continued support from you all. Anybody who likes my videos, comments, subscribes, shares, all that sort of stuff, it really is appreciated. Thank you so much. See you next time.